The transport ship shook hard as it fell through the orange sky of Kethra's 9, and Commander Elias Vance gripped the metal bar above his head while the alien prisoners around him screamed in fear and confusion. He was the only human on this ship, sentenced to exile by the Galactic Council for crimes he did commit and some he did not. And now he would die on a planet that the galaxy had forgotten. The Valkyrie insects clicked their mandibles in panic, their forearms scratching at the walls as the ship spun out of control. And the Scythian reptiles hissed prayers to gods that would not save them here. "We are going to crash," shouted Keth, a Scythian with dark green scales and yellow eyes that showed nothing but terror. "This is the end for all of us." Elias said nothing, because words would not slow their fall or soften their landing. And he had learned long ago that panic was a luxury he could not afford. The ship hit the ground with a sound like thunder made of metal, and everything went black for a moment before Elias opened his eyes to see smoke and fire and broken bodies. All around him, 7 of the 12 prisoners had died on impact, their forms twisted and still among the wreckage, and Elias felt a cold sadness pass through him before he pushed it down deep. Where it could not slow him, he crawled out of the broken hull and stood on soft, green ground that smelled like rot and growth and ancient things. And the jungle around him was thick, with trees taller than any building he had ever seen on Earth. The surviving aliens stumbled out behind him, 5 of them in total, and they looked at the world around them with eyes full of horror and disbelief. "This cannot be real," whispered one of the Valkyrie, a thin insectoid with cracked wings and trembling legs. The story said this planet was death itself made into land and sky. The stories were not wrong, Elias said, his voice calm and steady as he scanned the tree line for movement. Kethra's 9 was a terraforming experiment that went bad 200 years ago, and they filled it with creatures from my homeworld. "Your homeworld?" Keth asked, his forked tongue tasting the air with quick, nervous flicks. "What kind of creatures?" Before Elias could answer, the jungle answered for him. A sound came from the trees, a clicking and chirping that made every alien freeze in place. And then shapes burst from the undergrowth with terrible speed and hungry eyes. They were raptors, or something close to what raptors had once been, but bigger and meaner and changed by centuries of genetic tampering into perfect killing machines. The first Valkyrie died before it could even scream, torn apart by claws that moved faster than thought, and the second one tried to fly, but its broken wings betrayed it, and the raptors pulled it down into the grass. "Run!" Elias shouted, grabbing Keth by the arm and pulling him toward a gap in the trees. "Run now, or die here." They ran, the 3 surviving Valkyrie and Keth and Elias, crashing through vines and jumping over roots while the raptors gave chase behind them. But the raptors were fast, so much faster than the aliens could match, and one by one the Valkyrie fell until only 3 of them remained alongside. Elias and Keth Elias spotted a river ahead and made a choice that might kill them or save them, and he threw himself into the rushing water without hesitation. The others followed because they had no other option, and the cold water carried them downstream while the raptors stood at the bank and screamed their frustration at prey that had escaped. When they finally pulled themselves onto a muddy shore far from the pack, the aliens collapsed and gasped for air, while Elias stood and looked around with sharp, careful eyes. "How are you still standing?" Keth demanded, his voice raw and tired. "We have been running for what feels like forever, and you act like it was nothing." "It was not nothing," Elias replied, "but I have more to give, and stopping now would be a mistake we cannot afford to make." The Valkyrie clicked weakly, their exoskeletons dull with exhaustion, and one of them spoke in a voice filled with despair. "We are dead already, human. We just have not stopped moving yet, and this planet will finish what the crash started." Elias looked at the alien and felt something rise in his chest, something old and fierce that his ancestors had carried across frozen plains and burning deserts in every harsh place Earth had ever made. "You think this planet is special?" he asked, and there was something in his voice that made the aliens look up. You think you are the first beings to face a world that wanted them dead? He knelt down and picked up a stone, turning it over in his hands with a look that the aliens could not understand. My people come from a planet that tried to kill us, every single day for millions of years. And we did not just survive it, we conquered it. We ate the things that hunted us, and wore their skins, and made tools from their bones. Kath stared at him with something new in his yellow eyes, something that might have been curiosity or might have been the first tiny spark of hope. The galaxy thinks humans are weak. Elias continued, standing tall and letting the stone fall into his palm with a satisfying weight. They think we are soft and fragile and unremarkable, and they are wrong in ways they cannot even imagine. He looked at the jungle around them, at the shadows that hid teeth and claws and death, and he smiled in a way that made the aliens shiver. I know these creatures. I know what they fear and what they need and how they think, and I am going to teach this planet that it made a terrible mistake when it let me land here alive. The Valkyrie exchanged glances, and Kath rose slowly to his feet, watching the human with new eyes. What do we do now? Kath asked. Elias turned toward the jungle, and his smile grew wider and sharper and full of a hunger that the raptors would have recognized if they could see it. Now we stop being prey, he said. Now we become the thing that everything else on this planet learns to fear. Now we hunt. And somewhere deep in the jungle, something ancient and terrible lifted its massive head and tasted the air, sensing that something new had arrived on its world. Something that smelled like challenge and defiance and the promise of a fight. Unlike any it had known before, the game had changed, and the human had just made the first move. They found shelter in a cave system carved into the side of a rocky hill, and Elias checked every shadow and every corner before he let the others enter. The cave was deep and cool and smelled like old stone and nothing else, which meant nothing had claimed it as a den. And that was good enough for now. The three Valkyrie collapsed against the walls the moment they were inside, their bodies shutting down as their fast metabolisms demanded rest that could not be delayed. Kath lasted a few minutes longer, but then he too sank to the ground, his scales pale and his breathing heavy and slow. We must sleep, the Scythian said, his voice weak and almost pleading. Our bodies cannot continue like this. We've been moving for 6 hours, and we have nothing left to give. Elias nodded, but he did not sit down. And instead he moved to the cave entrance and began gathering stones and sticks and anything else he could find. What are you doing? Kath asked, forcing his eyes to stay open, even as exhaustion pulled at him. You need rest as much as we do. Maybe more. I will rest when we are safe, Elias replied. And we are not safe yet. Not even close. The aliens watched in confused silence as the human worked through the hours, never stopping, never slowing, moving with a focus and energy that should not have been possible. Elias built a fire first, striking stones together until sparks caught on dry grass and grew into flames that pushed back the darkness of the cave. The Valkyrie made sounds of fear at the sight of it, clicking and chittering in alarm. Fire! One of them cried. You have made fire inside our shelter. Are you trying to kill us? Fire is life, Elias said calmly, feeding small sticks to the growing flames. Fire is warmth and light and safety. Fire is what my ancestors used to change from hunted animals into the rulers of their world. Kath watched the flames dance and felt something strange. A warmth that went deeper than his scales. A comfort he had not expected to find on this death world. Your people mastered fire, he said slowly. That is how you survived your planet. That was just the beginning, Elias replied. And he picked up a long straight branch and began sharpening one end with a stone. Fire let us cook food and scare away predators and see in the darkness. But it was what we did next that made us dangerous. He held up the sharpened branch, now a crude but deadly spear. and the aliens stared at it with growing understanding. We made tools. We made weapons. We took the world apart and put it back together in ways that served us. And nothing could stop us once we started. Through the night, Elias worked while the aliens slept, carving spears and building traps and planning things that his exhausted companions could not even imagine. When morning light crept into the cave, the Valkyrie woke to find a small arsenal waiting for them, and Elias sitting by the fire with red eyes and steady hands. "Did you sleep at all?" Keth asked, genuine concern in his voice. "I got a few minutes here and there," Elias said, which was almost true. Humans can push through fatigue when we need to. Our bodies produce chemicals that keep us moving, even when we should fall down. "That is not possible," one of the Valkyrie said. "No species can function without proper rest. The body breaks down. The mind fails." Elias smiled, and there was something tired but fierce in his eyes. "Let me tell you about persistence hunting," he said. And the aliens leaned closer because something in his voice demanded attention. "Long ago, before we had tools or fire or anything else, humans survived by doing something that no other predator in the galaxy does." He stood and walked to the cave entrance, looking out at the jungle with its hidden dangers and endless green shadows. "We would find an animal, something fast and strong and dangerous, and we would chase it. Not fast because we could never match its speed, but steady, always moving, never stopping." Keth tilted his head in confusion. "But if you could not catch it, what was the point?" "The point was that we did not need to catch it," Elias said. "We just needed to follow it. For hours, for days if we had to, never letting it rest, never letting it recover." He turned back to face them, and his eyes were hard with ancient knowledge. "You see, most animals cannot sweat like humans can. They cannot cool their bodies while running, so they overheat, they get tired. Their muscles fill with poison and their hearts give out." The aliens were silent, processing this information with growing horror. "We would chase them until they fell," Elias continued, "until they could not run anymore, until their own bodies betrayed them. And then we would walk up to them and finish what we started." "That is monstrous," a Valkyrie whispered. "That is the most terrifying thing I have ever heard." "That is what we are," Elias agreed. "We are the monsters that do not stop, the nightmares that keep coming. The only predator in the universe that hunts by simply refusing to quit." A sound came from outside, deep and rumbling, and the ground shook slightly beneath their feet. Elias moved to the cave entrance and looked out. And what he saw made his heart beat faster, but not with fear. It was huge. A creature that looked like the ancient Tyrannosaurus of Earth, but bigger and covered in scars from 100 battles it had won. And it was moving through the jungle toward their hill with slow, deliberate steps. "It has found us," Keth said, his voice breaking with terror. "We need to run, we need to hide, we need to do something." The Valkyrie were already pressing themselves against the back wall of the cave, making sounds of pure animal panic, but Elias did not run and he did not hide. And instead he picked up one of his spears and looked at the approaching beast with calculating eyes. "No," he said quietly. "We are not running from this one." Keth grabbed his arm, claws digging in with desperate strength. "Are you insane? That thing is a god of death. It will eat us without even slowing down." Elias turned to look at him, and there was something in the human's eyes that Keth had never seen before. Something old and patient and absolutely certain. "That thing is an animal," Elias said. "It runs on instinct and hunger and nothing else. And I'm going to show it what happens when instinct meets intelligence." He looked back at the monster in the jungle and smiled. "I'm not going to run from it. I am going to run it to death. I am going to chase it until its heart explodes in its chest. And then I am going to use its bones to build better weapons." The aliens stared at him in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were hearing. "You are going to hunt that thing?" Keth asked, his voice barely a whisper. Elias nodded. and his smile grew wider and more dangerous. My ancestors hunted mammoths and saber-toothed cats and things that would make this lizard look like a pet. And they did it with less than I have now, so yes, I am going to hunt it. He stepped out of the cave and into the light. And somewhere in the jungle, the great beast roared its challenge to the sky. Elias roared back. A sound that came from somewhere deep and primal and utterly human, and then he began to run. The great beast saw Elias coming, and it did not understand what it was seeing, because nothing had ever run toward it before. Every creature on Kethra's 9 knew to flee from the scarred tyrant of the jungle. Every living thing that saw its massive form would turn and run as fast as possible. But this small soft thing was doing the opposite. The beast roared and charged, its footsteps shaking the ground like earthquakes. And Elias waited until the last possible moment before diving to the side and rolling through the undergrowth. He came up running, not away from the beast, but around it, circling wide and fast while the monster tried to turn its huge body to follow Keth. And the Valkyrie had climbed to a cliff top overlooking the valley, and they watched in stunned horror as the tiny human played a deadly game with certain death. "He's insane," Keth said, his voice hollow with shock. "He has lost his mind completely." "No," said one of the Valkyrie, her compound eyes tracking the chase below. "Look at him, really look. He knows exactly what he is doing." And she was right, because Elias was not running in panic or fear. He was running with purpose, leading the beast through thick vegetation and over rocky ground, making it work for every step. The first hour passed and the beast was still strong, still fast, still absolutely certain that it would catch this annoying prey and crush it between its jaws. But Elias kept moving, kept circling, kept forcing the monster to turn and twist and chase. And he never let it rest for even a moment. The second hour came and went, and something began to change. The beast's movements became slightly slower, its roars less frequent, its breathing heavier and harder. Its body is overheating, Keth realized, watching the beast pant with its massive jaws open wide. It cannot cool itself down. The human can, the Valkyrie said with wonder in her voice. "Look at him, he's covered in water." Elias was drenched in sweat, his body's cooling system working exactly as nature had designed it, pumping moisture to his skin where it evaporated and carried away the heat of his exertion. The beast had no such system, its massive body generating tremendous heat with every movement and having no way to release it. And that heat was building inside it like a fire that could not be put out 4 hours into the hunt. Elias had to dodge a charge that came too close, the beast's jaws snapping shut inches from his face, and he felt fear then, real and sharp and honest. But he did not stop. He could not stop, because stopping meant death, and giving up was not something his body knew how to do. 6 hours, and the beast was stumbling, its legs trembling with exhaustion that it had never known before, its heart pounding so hard that Elias could almost hear it from where he ran. How is this possible? Keth asked no one in particular. How can a soft little creature outlast that monster? The Valkyrie had no answer because nothing in their understanding of the universe could explain. What they were witnessing. 8 hours passed, and the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and orange that looked like fire. And still Elias ran, and still the beast followed it, was not chasing anymore. Not really. It was being driven, pushed forward by an enemy it could not catch and could not escape. Forced to move when every part of its body screamed for rest. Elias was suffering too, his legs burning and his lungs aching and his vision starting to blur at the edges. But he had something the beast did not have. He had will, pure and stubborn and absolutely unbreakable. The same will that had carried his ancestors across ice ages and droughts and every disaster that nature could throw at them. 10 hours and the beast fell for the first time, its massive legs finally giving out, and it crashed to the ground with a sound like a building collapsing. Elias stopped and watched it from a safe distance. His chest heaving and his body shaking with exhaustion, the beast tried to rise. Its muscles straining and its eyes wild with confusion and something that might have been fear. And it managed to get back on its feet through sheer stubborn survival instinct. "Stay down," Elias whispered, his voice raw and broken. "Just stay down and it will be over." But the beast would not stay down. Could not understand that staying down was the only way to save itself. And so it started moving again 12 hours now, and the aliens on the clifftop had not moved, had not eaten, had not done anything except watch this impossible battle of endurance. The beast was barely walking. Each step a struggle that seemed to take everything it had, and Elias was not much better, moving on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. But he kept going, because that was what humans did. That was what they had always done. They kept going until the job was done, or they died trying 14 hours, and the beast fell again. And this time, when it tried to rise its legs, simply refused to obey. Trembling and jerking uselessly as its overtaxed muscles finally failed completely, Elias walked toward it. Each step an act of will rather than strength, and he stopped a few feet from its massive head. The beast looked at him with eyes that held something new, something that the apex predator of Kethros 9 had never felt in its entire existence. It was fear. Real and deep and absolute. Fear of this small, relentless thing that had done what no other creature had ever done. That had taken the king of the jungle and broken it through nothing but pure stubborn persistence. "I am sorry," Elias said. And he meant it. "You were magnificent, and you deserve better than this. But I have people to protect, and you would have killed them." He raised his sharpened stone blade, the simple tool that his ancestors had used to conquer a world, and he brought it down with all the strength he had left. The beast made one final sound, something between a roar and a sigh. And then it was still. Elias fell to his knees beside it, too exhausted to stand, too drained to do anything except breathe and exist. When Keth and the Volcari finally made their way down from the cliff, they found him there, still kneeling, one hand resting on the fallen giant's scarred hide. "What are you?" Keth asked, his voice filled with something that was not quite fear and not quite awe, but something in between. Elias looked up at him with eyes that had seen something ancient and primal, eyes that held the weight of 1,000,000 years of human survival. "I am what my planet made me," he said. "I am the thing that does not stop, the predator that hunts not with speed or strength, but with time itself. I am human." He stood slowly, using the dead beast's body to push himself up. And he looked at the aliens who had watched him do the impossible. "And now you know why the galaxy should be afraid of us." The Valkyrie bowed their heads in a gesture of respect that their species reserve for only the greatest warriors. And Keth simply stared at the human with new understanding in his yellow eyes. The jungle was quiet around them, quieter than it had been since they crashed. And Elias smiled because he knew what that silence meant. Everything within miles had heard what happened here, had heard the great beast fall. And now they knew that something new had arrived on Kethros 9, something that could not be stopped, something that would not be stopped, something human. Word spread across Kethros 9 in the weeks that followed, carried by survivors who had seen the impossible and could not keep silent about how a human had killed the scarred tyrant. Not with advanced weapons or alien technology, but with nothing more than patience and will, and the simple refusal to give up. Other exile groups began seeking out Elias, arriving at his camp in small, desperate bands, hoping that the human who had conquered death itself might help them survive a little longer. First came a group of Mordran, massive four-armed beings with stone-gray skin and tusks that curved from their lower jaws. Warriors from a proud species that had been broken by the jungle. Their leader, a scarred female named Thera, knelt before Elias with her head bowed. "We have heard the stories," she said. her deep voice rough with exhaustion and hunger. "We have lost 17 of our group in the last month, and those of us who remain will not last much longer without help." Elias looked at her for a long moment and then reached down and lifted her chin so she was looking at him. "We do not kneel here," he said. "We stand together or we fall alone, and I have no interest in falling." The Mordran joined his growing group, adding their strength and their knowledge to the collective, and Elias began teaching them things that changed everything they knew. About survival, he showed them how to build fires that burned hot and clean, how to cook meat so it gave more energy and carried no disease, how to use flame as a weapon against creatures that had never learned to fear it. The Mordran had always been warriors who met their enemies head-on, but Elias taught them patience, taught them to wait and watch and strike only when the moment was perfect. "The jungle is not your enemy," he told them one night as they sat around the fire. "It is a tool, a weapon, a trap waiting to be set. And once you understand that, nothing here can touch you." More survivors came, different species with different skills, and Elias found a use for all of them. The Velkari could produce silk from their bodies, strong and sticky, and Elias taught them to weave it into nets and snares that could hold creatures 10 times their size. The Scythians could sense heat with their forked tongues, and Elias used them as scouts, sending them ahead to map the movements of predators and find safe paths through dangerous territory. Even the smaller species, the ones that other exiles had dismissed as useless, found their place in the growing tribe. A group of Trivix, small furry beings with nimble fingers and sharp eyes, became the crafters of the group, building tools and weapons with a precision that amazed even Elias. "You have made us into something new," Keth said one evening as he watched the camp bustling with activity. "We were criminals and outcasts and condemned souls, and now we are a people." Elias smiled, but his eyes were distant, looking at something beyond the firelight. "We are survivors," he said, "and survival is the most human thing there is." The tribe numbered 43 when the story started. Whispered tales of something in the deep jungle, something that had been here since the beginning. The older exiles called it the Broodmother, a name spoken in fear and reverence. And they said it had killed every organized group of survivors for 200 years. It was created by the terraforming AI, Dara explained, her usually fearless voice trembling slightly. "When the project went wrong, the AI tried to make a guardian, something to protect its work, and it made a monster instead." "What kind of monster?" Elias asked. "No one knows exactly," Keth answered. "The few who have seen it and lived describe something impossible. A fusion of different creatures, always changing, always growing. Intelligent in a way that animals should not be." Elias considered this information carefully, his mind already working on plans and possibilities. "How does it hunt?" "It does not hunt like the other predators," Tara said. "It watches, it learns. It waits until a group becomes strong enough to be worth its attention, and then it comes for them." The camp fell silent as the implications of those words settled over everyone. "You mean it is coming for us?" Elias said. "Not a question. It has already started," Tara admitted. "My scouts found signs of it 3 days ago, tracks that should not exist. Marks on trees too high for any natural predator to reach." Elias stood and walked to the edge of the camp, looking out at the jungle that had become both their home and their prison. He had known this was coming, had felt it in the way the jungle had grown quieter over the past weeks, in the nervous behavior of the predators who usually challenged their territory. Something was out there, something old and patient and terrible, and it was watching them. "We cannot run," Keth said, coming to stand beside him. "The Broodmother is faster than anything on this planet, and it has killed groups much larger than ours. We cannot hide either. It always finds its prey, no matter where they go or how well they conceal themselves. Elias was quiet for a long moment, his mind racing through options and discarding them one by one. Running would not work. Hiding would not work. And fighting a creature that had defeated 200 years of survivors seemed like suicide. But there was another option. An option that required more preparation and more risk than anything they had done before. Then we do not run and we do not hide, Elias said finally. We prepare. He turned to face his tribe, all 43 of them. Aliens who had become something like family in the crucible of survival. The Blood Mother has been the apex predator of this world for 200 years because no one has ever truly challenged it. They have only tried to escape it or defend against it. His eyes swept across the gathered faces, seeing fear but also trust, doubt but also hope. We are going to do something different. We are going to make it come to us on ground. We choose, at a time we choose. And we are going to show it what happens when a human decides something needs to die. How? Keth asked. How can we possibly fight something like that? Elias smiled, and it was the same smile he had worn before hunting the great beast. The smile of a predator who had found worthy prey, with fire and steel, and the one thing humans have that no other species in the galaxy possesses. What is that? Thara asked. Elias looked back at the jungle where something ancient and terrible was waiting. Something that thought it was the ultimate predator. Something that had never faced a creature like him. The absolute refusal to accept that we cannot win. The tribe began preparing that night. And somewhere in the darkness the Blood Mother stirred. Sensing that its newest prey was doing something unexpected for the first time in 200 years. The monster felt something it did not recognize. It felt anticipation. The volcanic rift stretched before them like a wound in the earth. Steam rising from cracks in the black stone, and the air thick with heat and the smell of sulfur. This was where Elias had chosen to make their stand. And for 3 weeks, the tribe had worked to transform this hellish landscape into the most elaborate trap in the history of Kethros. 9 channels had been dug through the rock, connecting to volcanic vents that could be opened with a single pull of rope. Turning the ground itself into a weapon. Oil from rendered beast fat had been stored in clay pots positioned along the cliffs, ready to be ignited and dropped at a moment's notice. Every member of the tribe knew their position and their role, and they waited now in the red glow of sunset for the monster that had hunted this world for 2 centuries. The Blood Mother came with the darkness, emerging from the jungle like a nightmare given flesh. And even Elias felt his courage waver when he finally saw it. It was massive, bigger than the scarred tyrant he had hunted. But that was not what made it terrifying. The creature seemed to be made of pieces of different beasts fused together in ways that defied nature, with scales and fur and chitin all covering its twisted form. Multiple limbs of different sizes extending from a body that seemed to shift and change as it moved. Its eyes were the worst part. Dozens of them scattered across its head and body, all different sizes and colors, all focused on the small group of survivors standing at the edge of the rift. By the stars, Keth whispered, his voice barely audible. It is worse than the story said. Hold your positions, Elias commanded, his own voice steady despite the fear that crawled through his chest. We do this together, or not at all. The Blood Mother stopped at the edge of the killing ground and studied them with its countless eyes. And when it spoke, the sound was like rocks grinding together mixed with the screams of its countless victims. You are different, it said. And the aliens gasped because none of them had known it could speak. The others always ran or cowered, but you have prepared. I have, Elias replied, stepping forward to stand alone between his tribe and the monster. And I am going to kill you. The Blood Mother made a sound that might have been laughter, a horrible wet noise that echoed off the rocks. Many have said that. Little creature, and all of them died screaming. What makes you think you will be different? Elias held up his torch, the flame dancing in the hot wind from the volcanic vents. And he smiled, because I am human, and we do not know how to give up. He began to sing an old war chant from Earth, something his grandfather had taught him when he was a boy. A song that humans had sung for thousands of years before battle. His voice was rough and tired, but it filled the air with defiance. And one by one the others joined in. Alien voices finding the rhythm, the beat. The primal power of the sound. The Broodmother hesitated, just for a moment. Because in 200 years, nothing had ever approached its singing. That moment was all Elias needed. Now. He roared, and the night exploded into chaos. The first wave of oil pots fell from the cliffs, shattering on the ground around the Broodmother, and bursting into flames as burning arrows followed them down. The creature screamed, more in rage than pain, and charged toward Elias with terrible speed. But Elias was already moving, running along the edge of the rift while the Mordrin pulled the ropes that opened the volcanic vent. Steam and fire erupted from the ground in a line that cut across the Broodmother's path, forcing it to turn, driving it toward the center of the kill zone where the ground was weakest. The creature was fast and smart, faster and smarter than Elias had expected, and it caught on to what they were doing almost immediately. It leaped over one line of fire and smashed through a barrier of spears, killing 2 Velkari before the others could react. "Keep pushing," Elias shouted, grabbing a fallen spear and hurling it at one of the creature's many eyes. "Do not let it escape the zone." More fire rained down, more vents opened, and the Broodmother found itself surrounded by an inferno that grew hotter and tighter with every passing second. It turned toward Elias, recognizing him as the source of this trap, the mind behind the chaos. And it charged at him with all the fury of a creature that had never been challenged like this. Elias stood his ground even as every instinct screamed at him to run. And the last possible second, he threw himself aside while Thara and 3 other Mordrin pulled the final rope. The ground beneath the Broodmother collapsed, weakened by weeks of careful digging and the heat of redirected volcanic flow. And the monster fell into a pit of fire and broken stone. It screamed then, a sound that would haunt the survivors' dreams for the rest of their lives. A sound of pain and rage and something that might have been disbelief. The tribe threw everything they had left into the pit. Oil and torches and rocks heated to glowing in the volcanic vents. And the fire burned higher and higher until even the Broodmother's twisted form could not endure. Silence fell over the rift, broken only by the crackle of flames and the heavy breathing of the survivors. Elias walked to the edge of the pit and looked down at the burning remains of the thing that had terrorized this world for 200 years. It was still moving, barely, its countless eyes fixed on him with what might have been hatred or might have been respect. "What are you?" it asked, its voice barely a whisper. Now Elias looked at the monster that had killed thousands, the ultimate predator of a death world, the thing that everyone had said could not be beaten. "I told you," he said. "I am human." The Broodmother made one final sound, something that was almost a laugh. And then it was still. The tribe gathered around the pit, 41 survivors now, and they looked at Elias with eyes that held something new. It was not just respect or gratitude or even awe. It was something deeper, something that bound them together in a way that went beyond species or origin. They were a tribe now, a people. And he was their chief. Somewhere in orbit, a monitoring drone captured footage of the aftermath and transmitted it back to the Galactic Council. And when the officials reviewed it, they added a single note to the classified file on Kethra's 9. Human survival instinct exceeds all projections. Recommend revision of threat assessment. These creatures do not merely survive. They conquer survival itself. When the council offered to extract Elias and his people 6 months later, he refused. The tribe had built a permanent settlement by then, a fortress of stone and wood that stood in the territory that had once belonged to the Broodmother. Their survivors joined them regularly, drawn by stories of the human who had killed the unkillable. And the population grew steadily. Keth found Elias standing at the edge of their territory one evening, looking out at the jungle that had tried so hard to kill them. "You could leave," Keth said. "The council would take you anywhere in the galaxy. You do not have to stay on this death world." Elias smiled, watching the sun set over the trees where predators still lurked and dangers still waited. "This is not a death world anymore," he said. "This is home." He turned and walked back toward the settlement, toward the fires and the voices and the people who had survived the unsurvivable together. "Besides," he added, "we are just getting started, and the jungle, once a place of terror and death, was quiet and still, because everything that lived there had learned the most important lesson that Kethros 9 had ever taught: never underestimate a human."